Hi, my name is Paula Guilfoyle and I am the author and presenter of the Excel Club, providing online Excel training. Welcome back again. In this tutorial, we're going to look at more array formulas. In the last tutorial, we looked at basic array formulas, and in this tutorial, we're going to look at preparing much more complex array formulas. But to do this, you need to understand Boolean logic. So Boolean logic is in reference to logical functions, and we know that a logical function gives a true or false result. Boolean logic allocates a 1 to a true and a 0 to a false, allowing you to put these 1s and 2s into other formulas and other calculations. We know from maths 1 multiplied by 1 equals 1, but 1 multiplied by 0 equals 0. So if this is the case, a true multiplied by a true will give you a 1, but a true multiplied by a false or a false multiplied by a false will give you a 0. Actually, anything multiplied by a false is going to give you a 0. So let's jump straight into Excel and we will have a look at an example and we will discuss this in more detail. So here we are in Excel, and what we have here is a table of data. We have the date, we have the refund number, we've got refund values, we have sales rep, and we have region. And these go down to about 40 rows, 41 rows. But you could use a data set of a much greater amount of rows than what I have here for this example. Now what we want to calculate is, we want to calculate in these cells, we want to calculate the refund value for Mary in her northern region on this particular date. So we know we could use from our previous tutorials, we could actually use the sum if s function because we have more than one criteria. But prior to the sum if s function being available, people would have to use logical functions and they would have to use array formulas. And I'm going to show you how to do that because you may need it for future reference. So what we want to do is, as I said, find the refund value or the sum of the refund value for the reps and the regions for the particular date. So we look at this formula and then we'll evaluate the formula so we can understand the Boolean logic behind it. So we know from our previous tutorial, we put in sum and then we put in our first array and we multiplied this by our second array. In this case, we have three criteria. We have the sales rep, we have the region and the date. And then we're going to multiply this by the value, which is going to be the refund value. So let's begin the formula. Let's put in sum and we'll open up our sum bracket. Now in brackets, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually take our first array, and our first array is going to be our sales rep. So let's just highlight our first sales rep, which is Kate, and press Control Shift and down arrow, and that will jump us down and highlight the entire column that we want. And I'm going to press F4 to lock that in. So that's our first array, and because we said we were going to be using Boolean logic and logical functions, that has to equal something. So our sales rep has to equal Mary here in our table, which is our criteria. Now I'm going to lock in that. Press the wrong button there. I need to press F4. And I'm going to lock it in going across the columns. And I can close that bracket. So that's our first logical test. So if it comes in that it's Mary, it's going to be 1 because it's true. And if it doesn't come in as Mary, it's going to be 0 because it's false. And we'll see this when we evaluate the formula. We want to multiply this by something. And what do we want to multiply this by? Well, our second criteria is the region. So we are going to select our region. So I'll put the active cell up to the first region, Control Shift and down arrow to take the whole column. Press F4 to lock the cells in. And that is going to have to be equal to, and again, it's going to be equal to our criteria, which is north. And I'm going to press F4 to lock that in when I pull it down the actual rows. And I can close that bracket. So for our first array, we'll get a series of 1 or zeros if it equals to the name criteria, or the name listed in the criteria. It'll then multiply them 1 or zeros by the 1 or zeros it gets for this second logical test. but it still doesn't give us any values, and it also still doesn't pull in the date. So let's multiply this again, and now we're going to take in our third array, and our third array is going to be the date. So again, highlight the first one, Control Shift down arrow, and press F4 to lock this in. What do we want this equal to? Well, we want this equal to the date listed here in our criteria, and I'm going to F4 that, and I'm going to lock that in. I'm going to lock it in always, because it's going to be referenced to every single cell. Now that we have that in, we still need to multiply this by a value, and the value is going to be the refund value. So let's say multiplied by, and it is going to be from cell C2, Control Shift down to select them all, and press F4 to lock that in, and we can close the bracket. So we have our first array, which is our sales rep. This is a logical test. It's going to give us true, false, which is going to give us 1 0 1 zeros. That's then going to be multiplied by the second logical test, and the second logical test will also give us ones or zeros depending when it's true. When these two multiply each other out, it's going to give us either ones or zeros depending on whether these match or not. We then move into the third array, and the third array is going to be the date, has to equal the date suggested. Again, this will give us ones or zeros. Then the final array is the values, and we're going to multiply it by the values. Now, all of these multiplied together is only going to give you either 1 or 0. So it's going to be multiplying the value by either 1 or 0. If the value is multiplied by 0, it's going to give you a 0. Now, if you remember correctly, the key to entering an array formula is Control, Shift, and Enter. And you will see when I put in Control, Shift, and Enter, it has calculated the refunds for Mary in the north. Let's fill this down, and let's also fill it across. And as you can see, it's filled it in for all of the listed sales reps and all of the regions. Now let's change this date, and let's see if things will update when we change the date. So let's change it to the 1st, and we will see Mary's refunds have come in at 1025 for the northern region. She's got none for south, none for east, and none for west. Kate is the same. Now, believe it or not, you could also do this with a pivot table. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to redo this formula, and I'm going to redo this formula in a cell down here. And I'm going to select a smaller sample of the cells so it's easier to work through the evaluate formula. So what I've done is I've quickly entered the formula in here with the smaller selection, and you can see the formula there, and Control, Shift, and Enter to select. So we have said Mary for the north on the 1st to the 5th for just the first 5. Let's go into this and let's go Formula Evaluate to evaluate the formula, and let's have a look at how this is working. So the first thing it's going to do is it's going to this, and it's looking to see what F5 is, and it's saying that F5 equals Mary, and it's looking to see if Kate, Mary, Joe, or Kate equals Mary, and we'll get a series of ones or zeros to represent whether they are or not. So we have false because the first one wasn't Mary. You can see up here, first one wasn't Mary. Then a true because the second one was, and the others are false because they're also not Mary. Now let's evaluate that again, and it's jumped into the next cell here, and it is saying that it's going to be looking up the region. So it's going north, north, south, east, west, and we need to know if that equals to north. We know the first two do, so it should be true, true, and the remainder should be false. True, true, and the last 3 are false. Now it is going to evaluate that, and it is saying false, true, false, true, false, false, multiply by true, true, false, false, false. Okay, so the trues will give you a 1, the false will give you a 0. False multiplied by true is going to give you 0. True multiplied by true is going to give you a 1. So we have 0, 1, 0, 0, 0. So we can see that we have only got 1 true for both the criteria that have been evaluated so far, which have been the sales rep name and the region. It's going to do the same step now for the date, and it's not actually pulling in dates there, it's pulling in the number that Excel knows to be that particular date. We covered that in formatting in previous tutorials. And again, this is going to give us a series of true or falses depending on whether they match the correct criteria. We've true, 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 false. Now, this first true is going to be multiplied by this 0 here. The second true will be multiplied by the 1. The third true will multiply by the 0. And the final two falses will multiply by them two falses there, which still gives us 0, 1, 0, 0, 0. Finally, it's now pulling in the value. And it is going to pick each one of these values, and for the one that it is true or you get a 1, it'll pull in a value. So it's 0, and then it's 1025, and then it's 0, 0, 0, and it's going to pull in the answer 1025. So let's just close this evaluate formula. And you can see there very clearly how well this logical function works with the Boolean expression and using the array formula. So please feel free to play around with this. We're going to use this same sheet in the next tutorial, and we're going to look at building a table. We're then going to look at advanced filters then as well. So thank you for watching. Goodbye now.